I remember the late summer of 1980. Newly earned driver's license in hand with its promise of independence and mobility, recently returned from my confirmation trip to Israel, and my first time quite so far apart from my family, on the cusp of that all-important junior year in high school and the gateway to all that lay ahead. Amidst that potent cocktail of raging hormones and germinating identity grew a passion for politics. Learning about and participating in the political process was more than a longing to become an adult. It seemed like a real, concrete way to make a difference in the world. Though I was still too young to cast a ballot, I knew that 1980 was quite a wild political season. Ted Kennedy had risen on a wave of nostalgia and crashed again on that bridge in Chappaquiddick. Jimmy Carter had forged a peace in the Middle East, but governed a languid economy, and the formerly too extreme Ronald Reagan climbed the ranks of a rising conservative movement. For a politically precocious 16-year-old, Reagan was far too conformist and reactionary, Carter too milquetoast and unremarkable, and so I chose to throw my lot behind the dark horse maverick, John Anderson. Remember him? I learned about his policies, which seemed fresh and distinct from the other two partisan paths. I emblazoned my bedroom window facing the street with his sticky swag, an act of devotion for which my friends still mock me to this day. And I worked the streets of San Francisco's Embarcadero, spreading the good news to passers-by in the financial district who were, let's just say, a bit less fired up in their civic passions when nudged on their lunch hours by an overzealous, lanky teen. And though there is much that is wistfully funny about my youthful idealism bordering on the naive, there is also something I wish I could recapture. That first sense of sacred civic obligation to serve a cause greater than my own, a deep belief in the ability to translate ideals into action in the public square, and an unqualified confidence that elections mattered in determining my fate and the fate of our nation. It is trite to warn that this or that election is the most important one in a generation. But in looking toward our path to the ballot box in less than 60 days, this cautionary cliche is frighteningly on the mark. We all know, ma nishtana ha-election hazeh, why this election is different from all others. Mixing the holidays though. Our nation, our world is at a crossroads, and what we choose to do or not do in the next 2 months will profoundly alter the lives of our children and grandchildren. And yet there is a painful irony between the critical importance of what's at stake and the value many have come to ascribe to voting, especially in a midterm election. In 2016, a presidential contest that historically generates more interest, 40% of those eligible did not vote. And for those whose future is inextricably tied to this biennial choice, fewer than 1 in 2 18 to 29-year-olds took the time to punch a Chad for the world they'll inherit. In the late 60s, my father, a rabbi in Baltimore, buried young men returning in flag-draped coffins from Vietnam. The twisted logic of 18-year-olds dying for this country, yet unable to vote until the age of 21, led to the passage of the 26th Amendment, which lowered the age of eligibility to 18. It is a tragic waste that so many of today's young adults do not embrace a right their peers perished to provide. If there was ever a time to rise and overcome these trends, this is that time. If there was ever a time to ensure that we are registered and actually vote, and that 5 of our friends are registered and actually vote, this is that time. What's also different about this election are the unprecedented obstacles we face. The gerrymandering of districts resembling microscopic viruses for partisan advantage is now the norm. The enduring legacy of Jim Crow era to suppress minority voters threatens many of the strides achieved through civil rights. And the undeniable evidence of sabotage, espionage, and cyber warfare by an international arch adversary has sown chaos and doubt in the integrity of our elections. It is no wonder that many are cynical about the value of their vote, apathetic in their will to vote, and fatigued by the never-ending outrage of it all. But the total cost of these challenges is more than one vote cast in one election. These challenges endanger the very foundation of our democracy, and thus the enduring freedoms we've come to cherish and depend upon. And of all the peoples who have benefited from the promise of democracy to secure the strength of our freedoms in this remarkable nation, we Jews have been abundantly blessed. When I teach about the more than 3 millennia history of our people, I remind students that as 21st century American Jews, we are the luckiest, most secure, most accepted, and most established generation of Jews to have ever lived. The tone for this sanctuary nation was set early on, beautifully expressed in George Washington's letter to the Jews of Newport, Rhode Island in 1790, quote, "The government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it on all occasions their effectual support." And we did indeed give our support, body and soul, to this nation that embraced us with so encompassing a welcome. Our hands built businesses and formed service organizations. Our blood stained the soil of conflict to defend its existence. And we ground the gears of democracy through the political process as both candidates for positions of power and committed voters to this most essential franchise. It is our right as good and full citizens of these United States. It is our obligation to secure the stability and the well-being of the nation that has given us so much. This mandate, this responsibility, this mitzvah to vote as Jews in America is also informed by our tradition. If politics is morality made real in the public square, then we possess a wealth of values to inform and inspire the call of the ballot box. Even in early rabbinic times, when democracy was something more Greek than Hebrew, Rabbi Yitzhak taught, quote, "A ruler is not to be appointed unless the community is first consulted." And I see other inspiration in the central act of this service, the sounding of the shofar. The blessing recited before reads, "Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy with mitzvot and commands us lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the voice of the shofar." In a few short words, 2 key acts of this season come to symbolize the larger hopes for our lives and for our world. The first word, lishmoa, like the Shema prayer, requires us to hear, to listen, to truly take to heart the voice of others as we do God's voice. And kol shofar, the voice of the shofar, that singular and searing sound of conscience and call to action, is a voice whose power lies in our willingness to amplify it in the world. For if you care about the fundamental need for facts as a basis for a shared reality, t'kiyah, sound the voice of your shofar. If you value truth as a noble pursuit toward a higher wisdom, truah, sound the voice of your shofar. If you strive to, in words of Torah, serve and secure the earth as stewards of this God-given gift, a habitable planet we hope to bequeath to our grandchildren, shvarim, sound the voice of your shofar. And if we are to be pursuers of justice as God longs us to be, impressing right and equity into the social fabric of our fraying culture, Tkiya Gedolah, sound the voice of your shofar, from the lush forests of the Olympic Peninsula to the warm sands of Miami Beach. And in words so profound and poignant that we will read them on Yom Kippur morning, words that define the very essence of our bond with God and work in the world, we are challenged, Uvacharta b'chaim laman tichyeh ata v'zarecha. Choose life so that you and your offspring may live. For of all the free will choices that we make in our lives, the simple and the sacred, the act of voting is as simple to do as it is sacred in its expression of your vision, of God's vision for a better world. But let me be clear, this is not a partisan plea. This is our duty as Americans, all Americans. It is a common call of citizenship incumbent on us all, and perhaps a recommitment to this blessed civic act holds the key to reaffirming the bonds we continue to share. Every 4th of July, something meaningful and moving takes place at Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home. In so many ways, it is an appropriate setting, reflecting our founder's contradictions as both slaveholder and architect of our grand experiment in democracy. It is a contradiction inherent in the American experience, a journey of moral peaks and valleys, but one of an unqualified upward trajectory of the imperfect striving for the ideal. Each Independence Day, a group of aspiring citizens take their oaths of naturalization at Monticello to become fully endowed Americans. One of them, Keliboli Nekareni, came here from Lesotho, Africa when she was 13. Her mother brought her for a better education and a better life. It took her almost 40 years to become a citizen, in many ways amplified by her desire to vote, to contribute fully to the nation that has given her so much. She shared, quote, "I want to participate in the political system in a fair way. There are a lot of bills that have been passed, a lot of legislation, and I benefited from it. I felt like it's time for me to participate. I also realize that if I'm not voting, I won't be able to go to Albany, go to City Hall, go to Washington, and talk to public officials because I don't vote. If you're voting, at least you're saying I support something. And to me, I feel so honored and so blessed that I can say I'm contributing to X because I believe in what they're doing." That's what it's all about. Being a citizen means being engaged. And really, for me, it's important because in Africa, some people become leaders forever and ever, and I don't think that's fair. Here, you get an opportunity to at least pick someone that is choice. You can have a choice, and you can cast that vote. How strange, and yet how inspiring it is that we often only truly appreciate the rights we have when seen through the aspiring eyes of others. When it comes down to it, in the face of apathy and cynicism, against the forces both foreign and domestic that seek to deny this basic right or destroy our trust in this most critical act, voting is an act of faith. And we are nothing if not a people of faith. The words of the great sage Maimonides continue to speak to Jews in 2018 America. Ani ma'amim, I still believe. Ani ma'amim, I still believe in the ideals for which this nation stands. Ani ma'amim, I still believe in the triumph of good and right and life over hate and fear and darkness. Ani ma'amin. I still believe that I have a voice that resounds in sweet harmony with the voice of God, if we would only sound it loudly and clearly and well. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. And let us say,